one thing I've found in myself, and I think it's what really makes me feel good with my journey, is I love to just share that. And I've never had people ask me before for advice. So to have people come out and ask me advice through running, and I still don't see myself as being up there in running. I'm just like everybody else, but it's really nice to share my experiences, and I love that people will reach out to me and ask me a question, and I just find it just beautiful just to be able to answer that back and just to share what I've discovered in running, and I understand that for everybody it's going to be different, and it's not about trying to teach someone to be like me, but it's trying to teach someone to discover who they want to be.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the inspiring Stephen Redfern. Stephen started ultramarathon running at the age of 42. What drew Stephen to ultramarathon running was the discovery of the unknown, to discover who he is and what he is able to achieve. And achieve is certainly what Stephen has done. Some of his most notable achievements have been the Hong Kong 4 Trails, which is a 298-kilometre self-supported run on all 4 major trails in Hong Kong, where he ran through 3 separate sunrises, to running 11,500 laps of his garage, totaling 360 kilometres in a 2020 lockdown challenge, to recently running a 655-kilometre solo 6-day ultramarathon around his local athletics track. What I personally love about this conversation is Stephen's openness about his self-exploration and discovery through running. He describes his younger years of being more of a hot-headed, negatively orientated boy who found himself utilising bushwalking as an outlet, and now through long-distance running has come into a space of calm and positivity. As a self-proclaimed loner who struggled to get a few words out just 7 years ago, it is such a beautiful trajectory Stephen has been on to now not only be part of a highly supportive community, but a representative of such that people come to, including myself, for running wisdom. And testament to this, he has been invited to the 3,100-mile Sri Chinmoy event next year in Queens, New York, where he will be averaging 96 kilometres over 52 days to run what is referred to as the race of self-transcendence. Here it is indeed that he will experience the ultimate pilgrimage of endurance and self-exploration. Please enjoy this conversation of humanized reflection and performance mindset with the wonderful Stephen Redfern. Welcome to the To Be Human podcast, Stephen.
Welcome, Jennah. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, Stephen. So where I want to start off is you sent me an email with a little bit of your background. And one of the things that I noticed very quickly is that you actually have a beautiful way of writing and self-expressing that I very much appreciate. And I certainly thought to myself, I think one day we might see a book out of you. So keep that in mind.
Oh, thank you.
But you did say in this email that what drew me to long distances was the discovery of the unknown, to be able to be out there enjoying what life has to offer, discovering who I am and what I am able to achieve. So that I'm aware, you started running about 7 years ago at the age of 42, which is very admirable. And so I would love to know more about you before you started running and sort of started to have this deeper sense of self-exploration.
It's so only short time running. I grew up being very reserved. I've always been a fairly quiet person. I've always found it really hard to interact with other people, especially big crowds. I've never been good at parties. So a lot of my life has been doing a lot of stuff individually or with the people I'm really comfortable with. So I grew up, basically, I was brought into the world of bushwalking. My dad started me into bushwalking back when I was a teenager, and I think I just felt for myself, being a very individual person or very like a quiet person, that was really nice for me. And most of my bushwalking then ended up being solo bushwalks. So I grew up wanting to do bigger and bigger walks. Often I would do them solo, multi-day walks on my own, or with maybe one other really good friend, someone I could feel comfortable with, and I could just get out there. It was nice to get away from everybody and just enjoy what I would find. I would really reflect on the environment around me and just the bush, and that would just, a lot of that would make me feel really good out there and give you a lot of time just to reflect on who you are and just discover new things. So from that bushwalk, it did transition, I guess, to a point into running. I did find as time went on and life got busier and busier, I was always finding it harder and harder to find that time to get out and bushwalk, especially if I wanted to do a good 5-day bushwalk. It took a lot of time to get out there to do that. So I was tending to turn my bushwalks into more of an adventure, and basically quicker. So something I would take 4 days, I would try and reduce that into maybe 2 days, and then I would look into maybe doing that adventure over 1 day. So I'd turn a 4-day walk into a 1-day walk. But even then I would find that would still be quite a long time, and it just felt a bit slow. So when I finally reached about 42, I've been wanting to run for a lot of years, but just never found the right time or found what was right to actually start running. And I think when I just finally woke up back when I was 42, it just felt right, and I wanted to approach it the right way. And so I started it correctly, and it just seemed to just work really well. And that was just, for me, a nice transition from the bushwalking and then moving that into running, which for me, I found the two were very, very similar. And then what I liked in running was really reflective on what I used to enjoy in bushwalking. So that's sort of where my running came from 7 years ago.
And I'm really curious because, you shared even during this bushwalking, you had that sense of self-exploration of, connecting with nature, reflecting about nature and yourself. How did that change sort of going into your transition with running? Like, did it change in a profound way, or did it sort of stay the same in terms of reflection?
I think it stayed pretty much the same. I've always, as you said, I've always enjoyed that reflection, being out in the bush, just being out on my own, or just being out with people that you can really connect with and felt very close with. So the running was exactly the same. I find running is, I find I meditate a lot when I run. It's really nice. I get out there. Our lives are so busy these days. It's my chance to get away from the busy life.
Right. To
get out there, it may take the first quarter of your run just to let it all go, but then you can just let your mind go. And often I will do a lot of my running, especially when I get into my really long runs, my mind can almost switch off, and I really find I can just get very, very, very meditating style, and I could do a long run and actually not even realise what I've done for the last maybe 2, 3 or 4 hours. I can just let it all go, and that's where I think I really enjoy getting out there, shutting out the world, shutting out all the woes, everything we have to do. There's always so much to do. I'm always worried about what I haven't done. But you can get out there and, just for that period of time, whether it's a 1 hour run or whether I'm out there for 10 hours doing a nice, say, 100K run, I know that there's nothing else I can do. I just might as well enjoy what I am doing out there, and the rest of it I can worry about when I get back. And that's what I really enjoy about it.
And that practice of meditation when running is just so incredibly powerful. And I'd love to know, is that something that you intentionally learnt how to do whilst running, or is it sort of something that very naturally came in sort of more of those long distances?
I found it was natural for me, probably because I am a fairly individual person, or sort of more of a loner person. So it wasn't hard for me to just let it all go. I know a lot of people really enjoy like group running and that social aspect of it. So maybe for them, if they went out on their own, often a lot of people who enjoy running in groups will go out on their own, but may not necessarily enjoy it as much. because they look for that interaction with the other people, and that's how they enjoy the surrounds of their running. For me, I quite enjoy running on my own. Probably about 90% of my running is on my own. Most of my training's on my own as well. But in saying that, when I do get to run with other people, they're really nice, because I find that a special moment, because it's not every day for me. So I can really enjoy that interaction with other people, and especially because we're all the same. So it's you feel very comfortable. I don't feel like I have to be a different person when I'm, say, running with a group, because we're all the same. But really nice to then know that I can get back out and then just enjoy my own. And a lot of my really long runs, I tend to find it's a lot easier on my own. I can run in my own style, my own pace, my own feel, and it allows me just to switch off and just go back within myself and just enjoy that, and not feel like I have to do the right thing by being with someone else and you've got to interact. This way I can just switch off, but I don't have to interact, and I can just enjoy wherever I am. And that could be either on a road. I could do a long road run in with traffic and still switch off and enjoy that, as much as, say, if I got out in the bush and had the beautiful bush around me and just the lovely wildlife and all the trees. I can enjoy that just as much as well. So yeah, I found it was quite easy and quite natural for me to be able to do that.
Yeah, I deeply resonate with that. I'm a bit of a loner runner as well. And there is something so special in that. I think, particularly having more of that introverted energy, I think it's, I assume you feel very similar. It's quite re-energizing being able to go run on your own. And there's something so beautiful in that. I'd love to know, how do you go about integrating sort of that form of meditation, of being present, of being connected back into your real life? Is that an intention that you have, or do you sort of keep that just sort of out on your longer runs and on the trails?
For me, I tend to try, well, not so much try, I think it just ends up being that it stays out in the trails or out on my runs for me. Often when I come back home, life just seems to be so busy. I feel in the last 7 years, running has really changed me. When I grew up, everything was just always busy. I was always worried. Always felt like I had to do this or I had to do that. So since I've started running, and probably not even at the start, but more as I've gone into the longer and longer runs and really let myself go in those longer ultras, I am trying to start to transition that back into my life. And I feel I can approach a lot of things these days a little bit more calmer than probably what I did 7 or 10 years ago. I was always known as a bit of a hothead, I guess, when I grew up. And that's one thing I think running has really taught me. I've tried to get away from that a lot, and I want to sort of approach life a little bit more calmer and see it in a bit of an easier way, as opposed to always seeing it, I guess, in a negative way. So it's even though it does stay on the trails or stays out on the runs for me, it's nice for me to feel I can try and get that transition back into my normal life. And I think it has worked, and it has made me a lot more of a calmer person now than what I was in my earlier days.
Yeah, I absolutely love that part of your journey, because I think so many people can resonate with that. And, particularly men, it can sometimes be a bit more gender biased towards males having more of that sort of hot-headed tendency. And I think it's incredibly fascinating to see the rewards that come from being able to sort of have that release of tension and energy in running. I would love to know sort of, because you do identify as someone that was a bit more hot-headed and worried when you were younger. What was that sort of transition like for you? I'd love for you to kind of share, what did it look like at the start when you started to realize, oh, wow, like running actually is changing me as a person fundamentally, and I am becoming calmer than what I was?
It probably took quite a while. Probably the first few years of running. I think I always had a little bit there, and that's where I used to go for my bushwalk and do my long, big bushwalks. It was my way of getting away from being that probably younger, hot-headed person. I'd go out on my bushwalks and I could just, I guess, be a bit more calmer. But being younger back then, I'd come back into life, and that never really transitioned from one to the other. But then going into running, I always felt I wanted to start running for that reason, to get out there, to enjoy it, to try and become a more calmer person. And without even really knowing it, I think it just transitioned into me over the first few years, and probably only became noticeable within myself, probably in the last, say, 3 years of my running, where I've noticed that it's being able to bring it back off the trails and off the runs and back into my life. And often will make me think that when things arise in my life now, I will sort of stop and then just reflect and think about how to approach it, and not necessarily want to go straight into the deep end and approach it on a hard way, but think about it first. How can I do a bit more calmer? And that's how I've brought my running back into my life. It's now makes me definitely sit back and rethink how I do things first, before going straight in there and just doing it, and then realising after the fact that maybe that wasn't quite the right way.
And how does that affect the people around you? Because, I always find this so fascinating, and I try to ask as many people as possible because, any sort of larger event that I've been in that I've felt has been fundamentally transformational for me, I always find fascinating because, you return back to sort of your day-to-day and the people that didn't experience what you experienced. And sometimes you may have had really profound reflections in the way that you behave or, think of yourself. And this obviously makes an impact on those around you. I'd be curious. I know that your wife Penny is just like the best crew support, family support, everything under the sun. She just absolutely sounds amazing. Anything I've ever heard of her has just been amazing. What do you think it's like for her to be able to be a part of seeing you transform so much throughout your running journey?
She is amazing. She's probably been my biggest supporter. I don't know, running takes a lot of our time, so I have to really appreciate that. Penny has always been supportive of that and being very flexible and allowing me to discover, I guess, who I want to be through my running, and enjoying that journey. So she's often supported me where she can. She's the best crew person, so she knows me so well, and we've got to a point where I don't have to think too hard or give her too many instructions. I can now allow her to freely be able to do stuff like that. And then also down to even just looking after who I am. So with regards to transitioning into being a vegan now from a normal just meat eating person in the past. And that was sort of Penny's idea or suggestion. So 3 years ago, we sort of moved into that transition, and she's been really good with that, by researching and making sure that the meals that we do have been correct and done right. So I don't sort of transition into this and then sort of not feel like it hasn't worked, and it's made me feel like I've gone backwards. So it's really nice, that I try and sort of reflect that back by not really wanting to be always argumentative anymore, and try and do the right thing by listening a bit more, which I never used to in the past, and being more appreciative and more understanding of the people around me, I guess, and what they want to do for me or what they do for me, and being appreciative of that, whereas I might not have seen that in the earlier days. So, and I like that in myself, that it's made me change a bit and made me realise that there's more to life than just sort of being a very sort of quiet but hot-headed sort of person. So I always looked at everything from a negative way. It's nice not to have to look at everything so negative anymore. See things in a positive light, no matter whether it's right or wrong. Try and find the positives in what people are doing or what life is, and look at that and try and enjoy that for yourself.
And do you think that's a lesson that you've learned sort of just on your own throughout this journey, or are there people that have come into your life that have sort of influenced that more positive way of thinking?
Definitely. With running, it's allowed me to meet a lot of people I feel that I can connect really comfortably with. I've grown up always finding it hard to connect with people. So finding a group of people that are a lot like-minded, but just I find quite inspirational. I have quite a few people in the running that really inspire me, who they are. Even people that aren't actually running, but part of the running community, really inspire me. And that connection has made me come out of myself a little bit more. And I think that's what's really helped me be who I am. Even though I've discovered a lot of that as well through my running, through all my hours I have out there, just reflecting on myself, letting my mind go, but also knowing that there's a lot of people that appreciate who I am now through the community of running and the runners that are around me. And I think that's really nice. So that's made me feel like a better person. So it's nice to have those influences around me. And I think even my wife Penny's realised that she can see that the group and the community that I'm with make me a lot better person, and she can often see that I'm a lot happier. I glow a lot more when I'm around the people that I feel really comfortable with. So as much as it's my running, it's also the community, and that's really nice.
Yeah, it's certainly a lesson I've learned as well, because I think when you have sort of more of that introverted tendency, particularly to sort of run and do your thing on your own, when you tap back into that space of being in an event and sort of being around more like-minded people, you very quickly sort of remind yourself how amazing it is to be around such positive, uplifting, supportive people. And that's certainly something I've experienced in the ultra running community, is just, maybe I've been fortunate, but I feel like anybody that I've met has just had such a beautiful story, and they're always so encouraging. And though some people may be competitive, there's always sort of there's always space to sort of first take care of the person next to you, or encourage them to go better and do better. It's not just about sort of that medal or first place in ultra running. And I think it's so beautiful in that.
Sorry, you really hit the nail there. Everyone is so positive, and I think that's exactly how I see it. No matter where you are, whether you're just out for a training run with one other person, whether you're out for a nice social group run, or whether you're in that race, everyone has a beautiful positive attitude, and you can stand on that start line in a race, or you can go out and be on that beautiful weekend group run. And everyone's there for the same reason. Everyone wants to enjoy it. Everyone wants to interact with other people. People want to be positive, and that just reflects amongst everybody else. No one seems to come in with some negative tendencies. They all want to come in. They're all there for the same reasons, to enjoy it. And I think that really resonates and shows. And I think that's what makes everyone really enjoy the community and make everyone feel so good. So it's definitely that positive feel that you can get from everybody. That is what makes running, and what makes each of us feel so good about ourselves.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I'd love to know more about the Hong Kong 4 Trails. I know this event is very close to your heart, and something that I was so curious about that I heard you speak about is that this was the first race that you saw your third sunrise in an event, which truly made me think, oh my gosh, that is a very long run. So I would love to know more about that experience for you last year.
Hong Kong 4 Trails was an amazing challenge. What really drew me to that race was it's not an actual race in its true sense. So the founder, Andre Bloomberg, who lives in Hong Kong, wanted to put on a challenge that you could approach it like a race, but you're racing for yourself. So you're not really racing for anybody else. You're not racing for a medal. The idea is you're racing for the challenge of, are you able to do what was put towards you? And it's not an impossible challenge, but it's one that was always going to be a hard challenge. But that's the idea, is in yourself, can you actually accomplish that? And I think that's what really drew me to that. And what I really liked was the whole idea of the challenge is it's a self-supporting challenge. So he sets a few rules in there. So things like you're not allowed to have polls. The new rule now is you can't have music. The main one is when there's 4 main trails that you've got to run. So he gives it a 60-hour time limit to become a finisher, or you have a 72-hour time limit to become a survivor. So It's sort of after 60, but before 72. So and the challenge is you've got to run all the 4 main trails in Hong Kong consecutively. It makes you run them all backwards. So for me, that wasn't too bad because I didn't really know the trails from a local point of view. But for a lot of the locals that live in Hong Kong, that's more of a challenge for them because they always know them in the opposite direction. And then when you complete the trail, that's the only, so what it is he basically has it, so each trail that you run, you've got to be self-supported. So there's no crew, there's no help, there's no one passing you stuff along the way, there's no aid stations. So when you start, you're on your own for that whole trail until you finish that one. At the end of that trail, you can then meet your crew, and predominantly that crew is there to help you then get you to the start of the next trail, which could be anywhere up to a 40 to 60-minute drive away, and then you're back on your own again. So I really enjoy that idea of challenging your oneself to actually accomplish this. And the idea of my third sunrise was that goes all the way back to my very first 100-mile race that I did back when I first started running. That was my longest run at the time. It took me 36 hours to complete my first 100-mile run. Wow. I had no real idea what running 100 miles was all like. I'd only been running for 9 months at the time. But all I did know is when I passed the 100K mark to the 160K mark, I really enjoyed that part of the race. And that sort of went from 22 hours all the way through to 36 hours. And when I finished, I just said, I found what I really enjoy. But for the next 5 years, I'd never actually run that far, or in time, I've never run that far again. So all my other 100-mile runs, even my 240K runs, they were all under 30 hours. So I'd never actually gone past the time frame of my very first 100-mile race. So my challenge is I always wanted to know what it was like to run past that point. So when I got to the Hong Kong 4 trails, it was ended up being a 54-hour run from start to finish. And basically you ended up going into your third morning, which was the Monday morning. So starting on the Saturday, and then the last trail, you're actually heading into that during Monday. And as much as it was the third transition into that third morning with that third sunrise, as much as that was really hard and you're almost falling asleep while you're still running on your feet, I really had a giggle that I finally got to actually see my third sunrise, which is something I've always sort of wanted to know what it felt like. So that was my own little personal sort of a goal inside myself, that I got to see that third sunrise. But funnily, it was as soon as that sun came up on that third day, it was just like a whole brand new day. Wow. Your mind, your body just completely woke up again. And it was okay to keep running. It was almost like you're starting all over again. So you'd sort of forgotten about all that tiredness from the last few hours of that sort of previous night, and then away you could go. So yeah, that was a really nice run. It really holds dearly to me, that one, because of the style of challenge that it was, and that sort of suited me really well.
And what does it feel like seeing that third sunrise? Like I'd love to know sort of like what goes through your mind. Like, do you have flashbacks to memories of your first 100-miler? Like, what is it, emotional? Are you excited? Are you just sleep running? Like, what is going through your mind when the sun starts coming up on that day?
Trying to keep your eyes open.
No time for anything else. No energy.
There was one small period for about half an hour. It was about 6 going into 6:30, just before the sun came up, and it was really hard to keep those eyes open. And we're running on a fairly flat area of that trail. It's called a catchwater. So what it does is it catches all the water off the mountains and then runs through a channel. But next to that is just like, it's about 7 Ks of like a cement flat walkway that sits beside this channel. So we're running along that, and it was pretty much to the point where your eyes were just falling asleep. And I did note how at one point I've managed to run probably almost what it felt like, close to a kilometre, with my eyes shut. And all I could remember was my brain telling me I've got to open them up, because if I go too far to the left, I run off the mountain.
Oh my God.
If I go too far to the right, I run into the channel where the water runs, and that wouldn't be good either, because there's no fences there. So I remember that going through my head, and it's like, you have to open your eyes, but your eyes are just telling you they don't want to open up. But you were correct. It was amazing when you got to see that sun come up and it was the dawn of a new day. It was so positive, and it did make me think all the way back to my very first. I often think all the way back to my very first ultra, my first mile of the Alpine Challenge, and going for that period of time. And it's often a lot of my running would always reflect back to that very first one and where it all started. So, and that did come through my mind. It's like I finally got to realise what actual full-on multi-day ultra running was like. And that was probably the Hong Kong 4 Trails was probably my first foray into knowing that was somewhere I wanted to just start moving into as well. And going from what I enjoyed with the 100 miles, the 24-hour runs, and actually starting to feel that enjoyment of going into 2 days and 3 days, and the experience of now knowing what it was going to be like to maybe even try longer ones as well. So that one was really good for me to make me sort of transition to that next stage of the longer ultras. That's something that I really enjoy.
And speak to me, because I mean, you know, we're talking about these multi-days, and I've got a couple listed here that I love to speak to you about. One sort of initiative that you took on last year during lockdown, you were very creative and decided to run 11,500 laps in your garage. And this, I mean, you know, I always say, you know, you're sort of taking things to the next level when someone in the ultra running space thinks that you're crazy. And I think that you are absolutely crazy, Stephen. I was looking at these pictures of your garage today. I've seen them before. I've showed friends and family, and just it's quite entertaining actually, people's reactions when I do tell them what you achieved and how you achieved it. But the pictures, honestly, Steve, they made me feel claustrophobic just looking at that tiny garage and thinking that you spent so much time running in, I think, how big was the lap in your garage? Like 32 meters, was it? 32 and a half?
32.5 meter loop.
It's a small loop.
The garage as small as it is, the garage is quite large.
For a garage.
The sense of a garage.
Yes.
At least it was a nice long garage.
Not for a running track, though.
No. Running track on a small scale.
So I would love to know, like, this just, I'm so fascinated in this because, you know, to me, just like full body reaction is just like, I don't think I could do that. Like, you know, maybe if I had to, I could, but just the monotony of it. Like, I'm a very variety orientated person. And I think it just takes such a special and strong type of mental toughness to be able to achieve something like this. So I would love to know more about the mindset that you went in for this type of challenge, and potentially how it sort of evolved throughout those days that you did do this.
It was funny. It's, I never actually it ended up being 4 days in my garage, and the challenge, which was given to me by the Victorian Ultra Runners as part of the lockdown challenges for last year, was to run 90 Ks a day for 4 days and to achieve a 360 K run. So predominantly it was like a 4-day ultra, and basically my goal was to get to 360 Ks at the end of the 4 days. I never actually found at all throughout the whole 4 days the run being monotonous.
Wow.
I actually really enjoyed the challenge. I didn't know how I would go doing this challenge. I'd never gone and run a 4-day ultra before, let alone do one in my garage. And
makes sense.
So the challenge was 90 Ks a day. It was originally going to be 100 Ks a day, but the guy, John Lim from Victorian Ultra Runners, was being generous. So we took 10 Ks off the challenge and said, I'll only make you do 90 Ks a day. And I always thought that was because it was 360. So it was like coming one full circle. But he goes, no, it was just pretty much, he was just trying to be nice and let me have more rest at the end of the day. So I did my first day, and I really had no idea whether I'd actually complete the first day, whether this challenge was going to be doable. So I got to the end of the first day, it took about 11 and a half hours, and I actually really enjoyed it. I thought, this is really good. I think going in, having a loop set up, making it like a proper race. I had an aid station in the middle of the actual garage. I was counting my laps through a lap counter off my iPad. My wife was coming down from upstairs, so because the garage is under the house, it was easy for her. She would pop down every hour just with some more nutrition for me.
It's great.
And away I went, and I broke it into basically 3 30K lots. So it was like 3 stints in the day, and even though I didn't stop, I kept going. But in my mind, it was like, I'll get to 30Ks, that's a third of the day gone. I can have a bit of, say, lunch, and then I'll do the next 30Ks. I could have a bit of late lunch, and then I've got 30Ks to the end. So day one was quite easy. I got through that really well. I really enjoyed that. I was quite excited to get up for day 2, and I kept all 4 days the same. So I got up at 4 in the morning, so I could start my run early, and then that way I could finish by about 4 in the afternoon. And I did that for every day. So I kept it very, very exactly the same, like it was a job each day. And that was probably what really helped, that I wasn't just sort of getting up and running when I felt like it. I knew in my mind that I had to get up, I had to do roughly 12 hours a day. I'll start at this time. My 3 30K stints always finished at the same time, like 8 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and then towards the finish. So day 2 was a little bit harder. I think the monotony of running on just that hard surface on day 1, I could feel a little bit on day 2. But then that all loosened up quite well, and day 2 was actually quite nice. I got into day 3. Day 3 was a bit of a lost day. I found mentally that was my hardest day, and I think having to get through that, after that it would have been okay. So I got through day 3, and then I got into day 4, and of course being the last day, the goal of just whatever you did in that 90, it was just getting less and less. So that was sort of like the finish line was coming. So day 4 was actually quite an enjoyable day. But I really enjoyed it. I never actually felt bored doing it. I've been often asked that I must have had so much time to count all the bricks in my garage. And my answer to that is I actually didn't have any time. I didn't count one brick for the whole time. I didn't need to. And again, I think going in with my long running, I was able just to switch my mind off. And that's what I found was the best way to do it. So I went in knowing I had to do it at a slower pace to be smart. So I started at the same pace that I wanted to run, whether it's day 1 or day 4. I let my mind go knowing that I'm going to be in that garage for 12 hours. So I didn't look at it as in the sense that, how am I going to get through this? I just went, I'm here to do it. This is what I want to do. So no one's making me do this to a point. So I might as well enjoy what I'm doing. And I just let my mind go. I had my music playing in the garage. It was really nice. I had an open Zoom meeting for a friend, John, down in Melbourne, who popped on and off at any time during the day for 4 days. So that Zoom just kept going for 4 days. And then I had friends over in New Zealand that we have a 3-way messenger chat. It's been going for years. So they popped on all day long with messages, with having a go at me, just having a bit of fun. And that was always good because that just sort of broke your mind up for that period of time. You got to talk to people. I had one of my sponsors, Tailwind, that I'm with, Rebecca Markey. So she kept sending me songs to put on Spotify that were all to do with going around in circles. So for 4 days, I was getting these little requests to put on circle songs. And there were nursery rhymes, there were good songs, there were rap songs. So I had a lot of things that could break my mind up. And so between that and just letting myself go, I really enjoyed it. And it's amazing how much you can put yourself into a run like that and not look at it as in a chore or monotony, and look at it as in a challenge. And I think that all just came back from like when I did 4 trails. So the 4 trails was only 3 months earlier. So It's all about looking at the challenge that you're doing, and they're all different, but they're all the same. And that challenge is something you give yourself. So you might as well look at it as in the sense that I'm here doing it because I want to do it, not because I'm being forced to do it. So how do I actually do this to enjoy it? And that's sort of how I approached the garage run last year. So, yeah, not that I don't think I could ever do it again. I have been asked a few times, am I going to give the garage another go? I think that was very unique. It was one-off. But I never regret. I really enjoyed that challenge. It's just something that I can put aside and say, I've given that a go. And I'm assuming that it would be something that probably no one else will probably ever actually have a go. And because we're not in pandemic anymore and we're not in lockdowns, the thought of wanting to do that probably won't ever exist again either. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it's so special and unique. And yeah, I just absolutely love the story and sharing the story. And I'm curious on your day 3, because you say that that was one of your more tougher days. And you're obviously already in, like, as you're suggesting, quite a challenging space. What is it that you pull on in those moments? Because obviously you sort of like go into your meditative practice, but is there any sort of like beliefs that come to mind or anything like that that kind of like keeps you centered? Do you just focus on your next step? Like, where is your focus sort of on those days that it seems a bit more challenging than the other days?
That one became a very focused day. The other days I could really let go and just enjoy. Because that one mentally was a little bit harder. It's I guess being that 3/4 of the way through, it was only just past halfway. You weren't quite into day 4. So day 3 felt really long. So I really had to break that down into a lot smaller lots. So my day 3 was more about 5K lots. So I would sort of look at around about 5, and that's as far as I would look ahead. So there'd be about 40 minutes of running at a time. And then each of those 5, I could then break that into getting to that 30K section of the day. But it was a point where your mind would come back more to, oh, what am I doing? This is long. A little bit of monotony did come out on day 3, and it was about trying to not let that take over. So music was really good on that day. I had to find more things to focus on as opposed to just letting my mind go. And the more I could focus, the more I could do away from that. And by the time I got sort of through the first 60, once you get into that last 30, that was quite nice. So I found your feet were starting to get a bit sore. Most all the 4 days, sort of the last sort of stint, being on that really hard cement surface of the garage floor, your feet started to really feel sore. And I think day 3, that was where I can then start to focus on, all right, I've got sore feet. How do I actually focus on this to not let that take over and really hurt me? And that was sort of where that got me through the last part of that day 3, was focusing on that pounding in the feet and then pushing through that and then just ignoring it and telling yourself that that doesn't exist. And it was amazing how much that took up your time and up your mind while running that last sort of 3 or so hours or 4 hours of the day. So that's sort of how I got through day 3. But when I got back to day 4, then it was like knowing it was the last day. That was really enjoyable. I could go back to just letting it all go again and just enjoying what I was doing and what I was achieving in the garage. So that was what I found positive once I got back into day 4.
I just love it. And, I love the trajectory that you've sort of led on to, because I know, coming into more recent times, you just completed a 6-day solo ultra that a lot of us have been following. And I know a lot of the community got together to come out and actually physically support you as well. And, you're obviously starting to go into the space of longer multi-day ultras. And this was something that you decided to do on your own on a track. And I would love to know more about this experience for you, because I know that, you're so passionate about the self-exploration of experiences like this, and you're going into sort of that unknown territory that you're so passionate about. So I'd love to sort of know, what were your thoughts going into something like this, and sort of how do they differ coming out of an experience like this?
I've been wanting to do a 6-day for a couple of years. I was hoping to get down to Adelaide for at least 2 years, but with everything that would happen and all the lockdowns, it just never happened. So last year, I think my Garage Ultra ended up being my sort of first multi-day. And that would have been my year I would have done the 6-day. That got rolled over to this year, and all was looking really good until we all got locked down again in the middle of the year. And I just knew as we got closer to September, the likelihood of getting to Adelaide was just not going to happen. And the 6 day was also, it's part of a bigger picture going into 2022. So knowing for the last 2 years, I always needed to do a 6 day. One, for myself, because I really wanted to discover what it was like. And two, it was my stepping stone into what I want to do for next year. So I felt not getting to Adelaide, I didn't want to lose that thought of wanting to do a 6 day. And that's where I came up with doing my solo 6 day and having to look within the area where we were stuck in. So because we were all locked down in our local government area, I had to find a place that was suitable to be able to do a 6 day that wasn't a race, that wasn't approved by anything, that wouldn't disturb anybody, that would be within the rules of what we're allowed to do, and in an area where it was a doable loop or a doable run. So I couldn't do trails. You had to be careful that it wasn't a too big a loop. You had to have somewhere where there were facilities nearby, not too many hills. And I'd looked for about 6 weeks, and it ended up I came up with the athletics track. One, because it was flat. It was about 15 minutes from my house. It did have facilities there. It logistically was easy to organise being on a closed loop. And the only drawback for that one is the track closes. It basically closes overnight, so it only opens at 5 a.m. and then it shuts just after 9 o'clock. So I was just limited to only being able to do 16 hours in a day. So I approached this exactly the same way as I did my garage, whereas I made sure I was at the track when they opened the gates at 5 a.m. and we'd stayed there all the way through all 6 days until 9 p.m. that evening. So it was 16 hours basically of running, pack up what we could, put it in the car, come back home, get everything ready for the next day, go back to bed and then get back up at 4 a.m, ready to start again at 5 o'clock at the track. So I really enjoyed, again, it was going into that 6 days. I really wanted to know what it felt like. And I really wanted to approach that sort of methodically. So I didn't want to just sort of hit it and just go, whatever happens, happens. I sort of wanted to run it like I do like to run a lot of my runs. I'm sort of fairly methodical in how I like to approach them. And that's what I did with the 6 day. And it was really good to discover, could you approach one like that where you did everything exactly the same each day? And how would you actually, what would you achieve in that for each day? I was really happy with my outcome. I ended up getting 655 Ks over the 6 days. And that was with basically not being able to run for 8 hours of each day, being that the track was locked out.
Phenomenal.
So yeah, and it had the same sort of discovery as what I found in the garage, but just on a slightly larger scale, because my garage was only about 12 hours a day, getting 90 Ks. It was amazing that when you're out in the elements, but you're now running 16 hours a day, how much, once I got past that 12, how much everything changed. Having a slightly bigger goal, how much that also changed as well. So I had a few more challenges, but I had a lot of enjoyment, and I discovered so much, how to approach it. I discovered what having sleep deprivation was really like. That really hit me on day 6 when I didn't really get much sleep the night before on day 5. To discovering a new way of actually approaching my nutrition, to what you would do in just a shorter run. It was just completely different. And what I really discovered that was what you do in your first few days, how much that can affect your last 3 days. And to make your last 3 days really good, you've got to almost implement that right from the start. Even though you may feel good to do it one way, you've got to start your first 3 days how you want to end it to make it go really well. So it was a big learning curve, but I really achieved what I wanted to achieve. And it was really nice because each day had a different feel for me. So a bit like the garage where every day was a different style of day, the same out at the track. So they all meant a different thing for me, which was really nice. So it's like 6 individual days, but one 6 day run.
Yeah, I saw on your Facebook, and I'd certainly recommend people go and read it. You sort of did a day-to-day reflection, and even had like a sort of a title for what that day represented to you. And as a reader, it was really amazing to read through your journey over the 6 days. And, you speak about sleep deprivation. I was actually personally surprised because when you hear of you running for 16 hours a day, you kind of safely assume, okay, he probably gets 6 to 7 hours of sleep at night and he's well rested for the next day. But no, reading your reflections, some nights you sort of had 1 to 2 hours rest. I would love to know more about that. What was it that sort of stopped you from having sort of those longer periods of deep rest?
It's as much as there was still 8 hours off the track. That was amazing how much shorter it was. Having to drive back home from the track, it was about a 20-minute drive from the track back to home. So that was the same going then again in the morning. So what I found was by the time I finished running at 9 o'clock, by the time you wind down at the track, there goes 15 minutes. You got to pack up everything on the track, put it back in the car. And even though Penny was there, she always helped. You still had to get it in there. You didn't want to do it before I stopped running. So by the time we got back home, there was probably already an hour gone from when I actually finished running to when I got to that. But it was a busy hour. So the hour was packing up, having to drive back home, going back in the garage, making sure the car's ready for the next day, heading upstairs and then thinking, all right, I need to then have a shower. I need to try and eat something. By the time all that got done, we're getting close to 11 o'clock at night. And that was finishing running at 9, but I still haven't stopped. And then you've got to tell yourself, I now need to sleep. And I had my alarm go off at 4 a.m. So already we're down to 5 hours. And the biggest thing I found was it was allowing the body to stop. And that was the hardest thing into transitioning, allowing me to have some sleep. So because it was all so busy, then you go to bed and tell yourself, I need to sleep at 11 o'clock at night. But your body hasn't really stopped and relaxed and then just calmed down. So you're trying to calm down while you're trying to sleep. And I think a lot of that was and then also because your legs are throbbing, so you throw a little bit of that in there as well. You've been out in the sun all day. We had a lot of wind for the first couple of days, so you felt like you were completely sunburnt, but it was all windburn. So you could feel all the heat radiating out from your face and your head. And that was what was stopping me from sleeping. So first night was okay. I think just being your first night and your first run, you just feel fatigued. You feel tired. I managed to get probably about 3 hours sleep the first night. By the second night, it was a busy night. I actually ran really hard right up until the end to achieve my 120K goal. And because of that, the body was still in burning mode. And that second night, I ended up only getting probably 1 hour's sleep because it was just very restless. So the last I remember looking was about 3 a.m. And then it was like I must have fallen asleep, but the alarm goes off at 4 o'clock. So then day 3, you start quite tired. But again, I could handle that because it was only day 3. I could push through it. Then by that night, I believed I got about 2 hours sleep. I think about 2 o'clock in the morning was the last I saw the clock. And then waking up on day 4, I'm now down to only having 6 hours sleep by the 4th day. Wow. And then that caught up with me. Also with my nutrition, so I had a nutritional change from day 3 to 4, plus with the body being quite tired. So day 4 was really hard in managing internally from a nutritional point of view and having a body that wanted to sleep or sort of shut down during the day, but still wanting to keep pushing and achieving a certain distance. So that was what I found quite hard. But then what I found, because I was quite tired, I ended up having a really slow last session and finished off the last hour with a lot of walking, which funnily enough then allowed me to actually have a bit better sleep on day 4. So going into day 5, I felt I must have had probably maybe back to 2 to 3 hours sleep in the night. And I felt that was probably because I didn't push so hard the previous night, like at the end of day 4, because I was tired. So allow the body to relax. So by the time I got to bed, I was actually a lot more relaxed. I actually had a bath on that night of day 4. So I think that just soothed me down. Slept a bit better. So when I woke up for day 5, I felt absolutely refreshed. And that's the day I really remember in my 6-day run. It also made me realise I found my answer to what I wanted to discover in my 6th day, and I found that on day 5. And I basically put it down to is I've discovered the why, and that's just how I put it. There was no real major answer to it, but I just discovered what the why was. And the why was I doing this? What was my reasoning behind wanting to achieve this? And day 5 made me realise that. And I really enjoyed day 5. It was so uplifting. And my drawback to that was it was so uplifting, I ran really hard all the way through to the end of the night. And then, of course, I did not get any sleep day 5. So I remember still looking at my clock just before the alarm went off, and then the alarm went off at 4 a.m, and I knew I had not had any sleep on that day 5. So going out on the track by day 6, by the time I got through the middle of the day, my body was so depleted. I actually have to say to Penny, we got to our lunch break, which was about 1 o'clock. And this was my first day out of the whole 6 days. I actually had a break during the day and I slept for half an hour. So I just said to Penny, I said, I can't go on. My last 4-hour session, I only managed to get 10 Ks in that 4-hour session because I was just so tired. So we stopped half an hour early. I had a half-hour sleep and then got up and felt really, really good and was able to go back out for the next session and still run my normal 25 Ks on day 6 for that 4-hour session. And it felt good. But then just to finish it off, we actually had another half-hour sleep going into dinner time. So that was about 5 o'clock. And that was enough to get me through the last 4 hours on day 6, but really enjoyed it. And I was finding that as that was finishing up, coupled with the fact that it was coming to the end of my 6th day, I was feeling really good. I'd achieved a goal that I was quite happy to achieve, knowing the restrictions that I had with the run. And I ended up finishing on a really, really positive note and found that my pace ended up finishing at the same pace that it was what I started with on day 1. So that felt really good for myself, but made me learn a lot about all the different aspects of running a 6-day or a multi-day. And I know I'm still learning, and I've only learned a little bit, but it's amazing what you can discover when you break it down like that. So they were all the individual days. Every day had their own feel and their own thoughts behind it.
Yeah, it's so important, something that I find very fascinating. I've done a couple of different multi-day ultras. I tend to enjoy them more. And it is fascinating when you see newcomers come into that space that are sort of maybe used to more of like a 1-day single stage event, and they tend to go out really hard on the first day. And if it's sort of like a 5-day multi-stage event or even a 6-day, you very quickly see them sort of learn from that experience that it's very hard to kind of show up in that space at 100% every day. I've certainly learned that myself as well. And it's quite fascinating sort of learning more about your body. And I know that you're very intuitive when it comes to your training, and sort of like even in my own experience, one day I might just have the hardest running day ever, and then the next day I have my best. So it's incredibly fascinating to see sort of the ebbs and flows of your body. And I know that, Scott Richmond, who we mutually know and has been a podcast guest, I'm trying to get him to do a multi-stage event because he's just so amazing at those single stages. I'm trying to kind of push him into having that experience because it is a different experience to the single stage. And I think, there's something so beautiful in having to get up the next day and sort of meet that challenge that you talk about again and again and again. And you do see that, what may work on one day is so different to the next. So do you think sort of upon reflection of such an amazing experience now that sort of moving forward in more multi-days that maybe you might take more of a consistent approach, or is it more sort of like a day-to-day sort of, what have you taken from that experience?
I like the idea of the consistent approach. That's sort of how I was trying to approach my first 6-day. I had gone in and I'd already discussed that I wanted to just not go in and go get the most I can out of day 1, and day 2 and then hang on for the rest. I really wanted to look at it in the sense of trying to be as consistent as I could for all 6 days. Of course, that didn't quite work. I felt probably having restrictions at the track, knowing that it closed at 9 o'clock at night. I felt I had to try and run the whole 16 hours. So for the first 5 days, I didn't actually sit down. So when I started at 5 in the morning, I was on my feet for the whole 16 hours. And I thought, I'll use my time off track to have my rest. Whereas if I'm in a proper race, what I probably would find with that is I could try and keep the consistency there, but then learn to know where I need to have my breaks. And I could say, doing a proper race where you're on the track for 24 hours, you may be able to stop halfway through the day and have your break there, as well as another one at the end of the night, and not be afraid that because you're away for 8 hours, you've lost all that time. You want to try and make the most of the time you're there. And I feel that I can maybe get a bit more consistency knowing that. It did teach me that even though it was consistent 16 hours a day, the consistency wasn't there in the sense that you're trying to push as much as you can. And day 6 sort of proved that to me, that at some point you do have to stop and let the body just regroup. And doing that on day 6, it's amazing the difference that can do for yourself. But I like that idea of trying to approach it on a consistent, every day trying to be the same, as opposed to heading out, getting a massive total on day 1, and then by the time you get to day 6, as you said, you can't be the same as what you are on day 1. So I like the consistency. I think I approach a lot of my running in that sort of sense, a little bit more methodical. Whether it works or not, it's every day, as you said, it's individual. So you don't know until you're out there how you're going to feel. But then I believe it's about adjusting. So it's the ones that will want to do that, but in their minds they can't adjust, and then that's where they really have a hard time. I think in yourself, if you know and be honest to yourself that it may work, but if it doesn't work, feel free to adjust, and you can adjust to a new consistency. And that's sort of how I found the track. So I knew I couldn't do the same distance on day 5 I was doing on day 1, but I'd set a new goal every day. And my goals were basically I did 140, 120, 110, 2 100s, and then the last day was 85. I could have kept going and easily got 100, but with the track closing, I just stopped at 9. It was more about doing the same time every day. But when I dropped my total to, say, 110 or 100, and I pretty much knew within a few hours on that day what my total was going to be, and as soon as I could adjust it in my head, I felt good. I didn't feel negative. I didn't feel like it was going to be horrible, that I wasn't going to reach what I wanted. I was quite happy to go, all right, day 4, it's going to be a 100K day. And that's how I approached it. And it made me feel good. And I think allowing myself to do that and not go, I need 120, and not getting it and feeling very disappointed, I still finished every day feeling really happy with what I achieved. And it made me feel good to go back the next day and start again. And it meant all 6 mornings I was out there, I had a huge smile. Getting out there, having an hour in the dark, watching the sunrise every single morning.
Beautiful.
Seeing who turned up every morning. As you mentioned, the community that came out and supported me, that absolutely blew my mind away. I was half expecting to get out there and I was just going to be on my own for 6 days, having people come up, do their track sessions, wondering what this idiot was doing at the track 6 days later. But everyone got involved. Everyone thought it was great. I got in no one's way. No one got in my way. The encouragement was amazing. And just all my local running friends in the community, how many came out? I had guys like Stuart Wallace. He came out every single morning to do the first hour with me and help me set up. Another guy named Daniel Tice, he decided to get off the lounge at 8 o'clock at night on the first night and just come and do my last hour. Enjoyed it so much, he came back and did that every single night.
Wow. Got
off the lounge at night time, came out and he ran the last hour with me. To a running group, Energy Fitness, they all came out. At day 4, I think there was about 25 of them on the track. And they were just
Awesome.
doing their normal morning training session, but I knew that they were there just supporting me. And it was watching them run around. I think day 4, I think at about 6 in the morning, I think there was about 45 people running around the track who were all out there just to enjoy running it with me.
Wow.
And it just blew my mind, and it made me feel so good. And it's what really picked up the run. And to me, that's what the running was all about. So even though it was all for myself, to see that other people enjoyed it and wanted to share that moment with me, that made me feel really good. And that's what I took a lot of that away from my run. And that was what made it really worth it in the end.
Oh, that's just so special. And I think that's what's so beautiful about these experiences is, even if it's just one person with a mission, a goal of something that you're trying to do, for you, it's so incredibly powerful how much that has a ripple effect in the community. And, to be able to bring that many people together, not even intentionally, for them to just show up for you and to celebrate you and what you're doing, it's just so incredibly beautiful. And it actually reminds me, because I have a listener question, and it is from Scott Richmond. I know that he went out and saw you one of the days, and he wanted me to ask you, Stephen, what does it take to be able to continually drag yourself out of bed day to day on, your 6-day run? I think, he was so incredibly inspired and in awe by it. And I think what he was really curious about is you do speak about the sunrise and all these beautiful things happening in the morning. But as you say, some of the nights you only sleep for sort of between 1 to 3 hours a night, and it's not much. So what sort of pulls you? I know you even speak about on day 5 figuring out your why. I'd love for you to share sort of what is it that gets you out of bed and onto that track.
What got me out of bed was something I wanted to do. I wasn't being forced to do it, and I felt in myself, why set myself a goal, something that I wanted to achieve in myself, and then to not want to get up every morning. So when that alarm went off each morning, at that period of time, it didn't matter whether it was 1 hour or 3 hours sleep. I just knew I'm doing this for myself. I'm only going to let myself down if I don't get out of bed. I've set that challenge for me. I did actually make it public. I wanted to sort of justify my challenge, so I didn't keep it fully private. So I did put it out there to let everyone know I was doing it. And that was my way of trying to justify it for myself. And getting up each morning, I knew this is something I wanted to do. I knew that I had my own goal, and to me, it's always about reaching that goal. I always want to know what it's like to reach that goal. And this was a goal that I'd been looking at for about 6 months. I sort of knew once we got back into lockdown for at least 4, it was going to end up being a solo run. I knew that in myself. I felt we weren't going to get to the actual proper race. So I had a lot of build up in myself about what I wanted to achieve out of this. And my achievement was I want to be able to get up every day for 6 days and know that this is something I want to do and feel positive about it. So to me, when I wake up in the morning, I just had that positive thought. I want to be out there. I want to be able to see that sunrise again for the next morning. I was curious to know who would turn up for the day. So that was always that was so motivating. It's like if I don't wake up and if I choose to stay in bed, people are going to turn up and go, where is he? And I would feel then I would let myself down. I would let the community down, and I wouldn't achieve that goal that I wanted to achieve. So there was it was a lot of motivation there to want to come up to the track. But it wasn't just that got me there. I always knew that when I got there, it was something I wanted to do. And as soon as I started at 5 in the morning, and it was literally, my watch started at 5 o'clock every morning, I took it off pause. And I think by 5:05, I'm already doing my first 2 laps. And I was doing it with a smile. And I knew that this is why I wanted to be there and I wanted to do it. So that was my incentive to get up each morning and know I'm going to go out and do something that I enjoy and be able to share that with whoever turned up for the day.
I think that's such a beautiful lesson and such an important one. And, being able to do these things for ourselves is so powerful, in the sense of, I think sometimes we can get caught up in, who's watching us do certain things or who we're competing against, and we'll just do that to try and win something. And I think it always comes back to those high achievers that, as you said, show up with a smile and they're genuinely enjoying what they're doing, is because they are doing it for themselves. And yeah, there's so much power in that lesson. So thank you for sharing. And I'd love to lead into your upcoming event next year, which you shared with me yesterday, and I am so incredibly excited for you. I personally can't wait to follow you on this journey, and it's the 3,100-mile Sri Chinmoy race or event in Queens, New York. Would you be able to share a bit more on this event and why you are doing such an incredible feat of an event?
This event's been on my mind for about 5 years. It's pretty much been what's given me my journey to doing like my 6-day and multi-day events. So my 6-day this year was my pretty much my unofficial qualifier to be able to do the event for next year. So even though the 3,100 is like an invitational, there's no real set criteria, but they do like to see that people are able to do at least a multi-day and try and be consistent, so they can feel that they can at least come into this race, which is upwards of 52 days, and understand what it is about having to come back each day and to run the same consistency that they can for every day and day again. So that was my idea for the last 2 years of wanting to do an official 6-day race. Not being able to do it with everything that went on for the last 2 years, I set up my own 6-day and worked in with Sri Chinmoy, and they were happy to accept that as my unofficial qualifier, as long as I could show that I had the same consistency, so getting up at the same time in the morning, going through to the same time in the evening, trying to run a fairly consistent day and showing that I could back that up each day quite comfortably and not suffering. So that worked out really well. That was pretty much one of my other parts of doing this, outside of just really wanting to enjoy and discovering the 6-day. So I've had in my mind for about 5 years that for my 50th birthday, which I will turn 50 next year, I would really like to run in the 3,100 and really discover what that race means. And the whole idea of that race, they call it the self-transcendence race. And it's about understanding that you can achieve anything you want to achieve. Doesn't matter the length, doesn't matter the time, because everyone will go through the highs and lows of any given race, be it 100 Ks or 3,100 miles, but it'll be about discovering, reaching those points and learning and understanding how to go through that and wanting to go through that to achieve whatever goal that you set down. And I like the idea of that race. It's the idea of knowing that you have to work through everything to get to that achievement, just really sits well with me. And that's just something that I've looked at probably from right back at the start of my journey when I discovered Sri Chinmoy and was introduced to Sri Chinmoy Australia back in my first year running. I did my first run with them and really got to know them really well, and we've become really good friends. They're such a great community, and then learning what they put on overseas, and I just knew in myself that was just something, if it ever was able to be happening and whether I'll be privileged enough to be able to do, that would be my goal. So I approached Sri Chinmoy Australia 2 years ago or a year and a half ago that we could work together, and they were very excited to have someone that was interested in wanting to do that. So they've been working with me and liaising with the race directors over in New York, and basically I was invited to have a spot set aside for me for 2022, post everything going well with all the lockdowns and everything. So as long as we didn't have any issues with that they would have a spot for me going into next year. So that's my goal for next year, and that's what I'm really looking forward to, and that's what I've been building up probably for the last year and a half with my running and my journey and myself getting ready for that race for next year.
It's just the most ultimate of ultimate events. And I'm curious, do you have sort of a structure that you're sort of aiming on focusing on over there? Because I kind of want to, for people that maybe aren't endurance runners, it's kind of very hard to understand this concept in their mind of someone running 3,100 miles day after day. I mean, I think it's even hard for probably the general person. What would be sort of your average mileage or kilometers per day that you're expecting to meet over there?
So for a race like that, it has a 52-day limit, and the course is open for 18 hours a day. So they want all runners to be on the start line at 6 a.m, and basically you get to run through to midnight every night. So it's 18 hours. Then they shut the course down for 6 hours. That allows you, because you need a break, also allows for all the organisers because they'll need a break as well. And within that time frame, they give you a 52-day time limit. So the expected mileage per day is 59 miles, or about 96 Ks. If you can maintain that average, then you will achieve the 3,100-mile goal within their 52-day time frame. Some will have less than that, some will have more than that. Instead of looking at it in the sense that I have to reach 3,100 miles, which is just shy of 5,000 Ks, you more look at it in the sense of each day is its own individual day. So my Garage 4-day as well as my 6-day were both done under the idea of how you would approach the 3,100 miles. And it's about looking at each day individually, knowing what you need to achieve in that day. So instead of looking at the total, like I never looked at the 6-day as 6 days, I looked at it as 6 individual days. I knew what I wanted to achieve on the day, and then breaking that one day down into my manageable lots. So it was 4-hour runs, and that's sort of how you would approach the 3,100 miles. So it's not so much going, can I do a bigger total every day and finish early? I feel you look at it in the sense that they give you 52 days. At the end of the day, that's sort of the ultimate goal that you want to reach. And you would then work back from there to know what you need to do minimum every day. That's what you would aim for. Depending on how you feel each day, you might have the privilege of getting more than the minimum. As they say, there will be days that you will probably get less than the minimum because you will have your ups and downs. And it's about managing through that and working through whatever you get in each individual day to get you through to that day, and knowing that when you come back for the next day, it's a brand new day. It may have new challenges. You may still be dealing with the old challenges, or you may not have any, and you just may have a really good day. As you said, you could do a run one day that's just one of your worst training runs, but find that you can wake up the next day and you have an absolute beautiful run. And I think approaching a multi-day of that length like that is, no matter what happens the day before, it doesn't mean that your next day will be the same. So you would approach each day as its own individual day, but understanding that it's about coming back every day and trying to do roughly the same consistency, try and be methodical. And everything I've learned from previous runners, when you watch them, a lot of them will do that. They break it down into, they're all different, but they break it down into their own little stints, whether it's 4 hours, 3 hours, whether it's 2, 8 hours. They have breaks at different times. Some will have sleeps at different times. Some go through all the way through and then just do their sleeping at the end. But even though they're all individual, but they all have the same idea, and it's about achieving their goal for the day and trying to be consistent as much as they can from day to day. And I like the idea of that challenge of working within yourself to do each day as they are, getting through all your challenges, all your highs, all your lows, all your enjoyment. And that in itself, when the time comes, you will end up achieving what the actual race achieves, which is to get to 3,100 miles.
And as you shared, there is that element of self-transcendence that this event is based on. And I have no doubt, running for, at the most 52 days, we'll see what happens with you, but, it's going to be life-changing for you. Are you going in with an intention of sort of some form of self-exploration, or are you sort of just going to get there on the start line and sort of see what unfolds throughout those days?
To me, it'll be what will unfold. I know why I'm going there. It is about that self-exploration, and it's what I've always loved about running. So this is just another form of exploring in myself what I'm able to achieve, but what I might come out and discover from doing something of that length. But it'll be going in at the start with an open mind about what I will discover through that race. I don't want to go in there expecting a certain goal or expecting to achieve a certain enlightenment from it, but I know that I will get that, but I want to be able to go in with an open mind and see how it actually comes to me and enjoy what comes to me and how I will actually receive that throughout the race. And that's sort of what I'm really sort of looking forward to actually being able to do when I get over there.
It's just so incredibly beautiful. And thank you, Stephen, for this just wonderful conversation. I feel like I've learned so much, and it's genuinely been fantastic getting to know you. And, thank you for being such a important part of the running community. I came across you because of that very reason. I know when I started running a couple of years ago, someone put me in contact with you, being like, Stephen is the guy that you need to ask the questions to. And any time that I've contacted you, you've just so, selflessly given me your time and your energy and your wisdom. So I just want to thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's one thing I've always enjoyed, and I've always been open. I've always said I love people message whenever they want. One thing I've found in myself, and I think it's what really makes me feel good with my journey, is I love to just share that. And I've never had people ask me before for advice. So to have people come out and ask me advice through running, and I still don't see myself as being up there in running. I'm just like everybody else, but it's really nice to share my experiences. And I love that people will reach out to me and ask me a question, and I just find it just beautiful just to be able to answer that back and just to share what I've discovered in running. And I understand that for everybody it's going to be different, and it's not about trying to teach someone to be like me, but it's trying to teach someone to discover who they want to be in running. And I think that's sort of how I try and approach it every time, to get those people or get that person who is inquiring or asking about how to discover something. And it's whether it's in nutrition, in training or approach, or just how do you actually do such a long run. I'll just sort of explain how it works for me, and you can use that within yourself to discover that for oneself, and how you will find what works for you in actually achieving what you want to achieve. And that's it's made me feel really humbled inside myself that people do approach me for that, and I just enjoy sharing it.
Well, we genuinely appreciate it. So, Stephen, on a final note, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
So for me to be human, it's about learning how to be positive. I've wanted to grow up, and I've always wanted to try and do that. And I have discovered how to approach life more positively. And I understand that there's so much ups and downs in life, but at the end of the day, no matter what makes you feel good, you can get out there and just turn that into something positive. And I guess for me, to be human, I've discovered that through my running. Running has been a big part of teaching me to understand who I am and to be happy with who I am, and to turn that into a positive note and learn that discovery. So that's my idea of to being human and knowing who I am. So I'm really thankful that I have discovered that in my life. And people have asked me before, do you wish you started this at an earlier age instead of waiting till you're 42? And for me, I don't regret doing it from an age of 42 onwards, like a lot later in my life, because I felt if I was to do it earlier, I may not approach it the same way, and I might have a different feel or different thoughts on what it's giving me. Whereas approaching it when I did, it felt like the right time. And that's really what's sort of made me who I am now and what made me discover who I wanted to be and being a lot more positive. So I'm really happy, even if it's only been for 7 years. What I've discovered, it feels like a lifetime.